Hello, everyone. My name is Nathan. I'm the Managing Director at Red Umbrella. A huge thank you to those of you who were able to make it to the Power of People in Business event down in London on Tuesday. For those of you who weren't able to make it, we didn't want you to miss out on the presentation. So we put together this little video just to go through what it was that we talked about. First thing that I want to sort of say is if you're listening to that title, looking at that title, the first thing I want to say is if you're looking at that title and you've got that da 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 in your head, you're very welcome. You're going to have that song playing now for the rest of the day. But what we wanted to talk about in this session was the impact that stress and mental health has on our businesses. If we're looking at the power of people in business, it's really important that we are thinking about how we get the best out of our people. And looking after their mental health and well-being and looking at stress is a really key way of doing that. So we're going to cover quite a few things in this session, but the first question I've got for you is, how many of you would say that you feel stressed at work? When we did this session live, there were quite a number of hands going up in the air, myself included. So you might be listeners thinking, yeah, actually, I would say that I feel quite stressed at work. Would you like to know just how stressed you are? And that's often the tone changer, isn't it? Of, well, I know that I'm stressed. I'd really rather not have to put a number to it. I'd really rather not know just how stressed. I'm quite happy being blissfully ignorant about that. Thank you very much. But if you do want to get a rough kind of ballpark idea of where your stress levels might be at, I'm going to invite you to do a perceived stress scale test with me. So, very simple test. It's 10 questions, and you're basically scoring them between 0 and 4, as I'll show in a second. So, it's a very simple test, takes a few minutes to do, but it's a really good way to get a rough idea of where your stress levels might be at. So, what you're going to need is just have a bit of paper and something to write with because you're just going to be jotting down some numbers. So I'm going to run through these 10 questions with you. And for each question, you're either going to be answering never, which would be a score of 0, almost never, which would be a score of 1, sometimes would be a score of 2, fairly often is a score of 3, very often is a score of 4. So you're basically just going to put a number down. Now, what I would say is don't overthink it. Just go with your gut feeling. What's the first instinct that you go with? Write that number down. Don't overthink it. So, first question then. How often have you been upset because of something that's happened unexpectedly? For all of these questions, we're looking at really the past 3 or 4 weeks. So, how often in the last 3 or 4 weeks have you been upset because of something that happened unexpectedly? If it's never happened in the last 3 or 4 weeks, you'd put 0. If it's happened very often, you'd put 4, or somewhere in between the two. Question 2. How often have you felt that you were unable to control the important things in your life? Might have been lots of things going on in the last 3 or 4 weeks, but how often have you felt that you were unable to control the things going on around you? Again, just put a score down between 0 and 4. Question 3. How often have you felt nervous or stressed in the last 3 or 4 weeks? I'll let you define what nervous or stressed feels like for you, but how often have you felt nervous or stressed in the last 3 or 4 weeks? How often have you felt confident about your ability to handle your personal problems? So many of us might have had lots of things going on in the last 3 or 4 weeks. How often have you felt confident about your ability to handle those problems? Question 5. How often have you felt things were going your way? So actually, there's a lot going on, but actually a lot of it's really good. A lot of it seems to be going my way. I felt quite positive and confident about it. So how often have you felt things were going your way? Question 6. How often have you felt that you could not cope with all the things you had to do? There's just been so many things going on that I just don't feel like I could cope with everything that I've got to do. How often have you felt like that in the last 3 or 4 weeks? Question 7. How often have you been able to control irritations in your life? Many of us will have different things that irritate us in life. How often in the last 3 or 4 weeks have you felt able to control those irritations so it doesn't overly affect you? Question 8. How often have you felt that you're on top of things? You say, you know what, there might be a lot going on, but actually I've got this. I'm on top of everything. I feel like I'm in control of it. How often in the last 3 or 4 weeks have you felt on top of things? Question 9. How often have you been angered because of things that are outside of your control? So there might be lots of things that have been going on outside of our control a lot of the time. How often have you felt angered because of those things? So again, 0 for never, 4 for very often. And the last question, How often have you felt that difficulties were piling up so high that you could not overcome them? That you just felt you were just drowning in all the things that you had to do, all the difficulties that you had going on, and you just weren't sure you could get out from under it? How often have you felt like that in the last 3 to 4 weeks? I'd like to say it's a simple case of just being able to add those up, but unfortunately, we've got to do a little bit of maths with this. I know that you probably didn't come onto this video expecting to do maths problems, but very, very simple ones, because you can sort of see some of those questions are kind of sort of negative tint to them. So like question 3, how often have you felt nervous or stressed? Some of them have a bit more of a positive tint. So question 4, how often have you felt confident about? So we just need to kind of level that out. So the way that we do that is for questions 4, 5, 7, and 8, you just need to reverse the scores. So for 4, 5, 7, and 8, if you put 0, just change that to a 4. If you put 1, change it to a 3. If you put 2, it stays the same. If you put 3, change it to a 1. And if you put 4, change it to a 0. So you're only doing that for questions 4, 5, 7, and 8. And once you've done that, then you can add your scores up. You can pause this video whilst you do it, but you're going to end up with a score somewhere between 0 and 40. And I'm going to assume that very few people are going to score 0. I'm going to hope that very few people are scoring 40. We're probably going to be somewhere between the two, and we can sort of break this down into 3 tiers depending on your score. So if you scored between 0 and 30, that's considered to be low stress. That means actually you're doing very well, that you haven't got a huge amount of stress in your life, and whatever stresses you have got, you're probably coping with them pretty well. So 0 to 13 is low stress. That's great. 14 to 26, that's considered moderate stress. So that might be that actually you're coping pretty well with this. It might not be having an impact on your day-to-day life, but if you're towards the higher end of that moderate stress, the 24, 25, 26 maybe, you might find that actually this is starting to have an impact on your day-to-day life, on how you feel. And I think that's important, if we recognize that, to think about what we might do about that, because it may not cause you a problem now, but it's also probably not something that you want to continue long term. If you score 27 or above, and I'll be honest, when I scored myself on this, I scored 28, so I include myself in the high stress category. If you scored above 27, there's just no hope for any of us. We're beyond hope at that point, which of course is not true. Everyone is capable of being helped and supported, but it is something where there's a good likelihood that stress is going to be playing out in some way. You're probably very aware that you're stressed at that point. Now, what's interesting is just be curious about your score and where you thought it might be. So did your score come in at lower than what you thought it would be? Did your score come in higher than you thought it would be? And I always say to people, like, be curious about that. This is a very rough ballpark figure. It's not an exact science, although it's been designed to give a pretty accurate rough estimation of where you might be. It's not a diagnosing tool, but it might mean that actually you can use it to judge where you are now. And because it's such a simple test to do, and you can do an internet search for perceived stress scale test and pull up these questions at any point. It's a good way of kind of, I tend to sort of do it at the start of every month because it gives me a good sort of marker of where I might be in any given month. So now you have an idea of where your stress levels might be. Here's the next question for you. What percentage of workers report that they experience moderate to high stress levels? What percentage of UK workers do you think report they experience moderate to high stress levels? I'm going to give you a moment just to think of a number, and then I'm going to show you what the actual statistics tell us. Statistically, it is around 79% of UK workers reported experiencing moderate to high stress levels. 4 out of every 5 people in your workplace, pretty much. Is that higher than what you thought it would be? Is it lower than what you thought it would be? I think what we can probably all agree is it's a high number. 4 out of 5 experiencing moderate to high stress. Now, again, many of those might be coping relatively okay with that, but there's going to be some people there that aren't. And actually, when we delve into these statistics a little bit more, we can see that actually 63% cited a lack of support in their workplace as the main reason for experiencing high stress levels. So we're going to talk about what kind of supports can be put in place in the workplace, but I think it's important to recognize that actually it's not working for a lot of people. They're citing that lack of support as being a key factor. And another interesting statistic is that 61% of UK employees who left a job in the last year cited stress as one of the main reasons for it. Now, there's two ways of looking at that. Firstly, again, 61% is a really high number. That percentage of people who left mainly or predominantly because of stress. The silver lining to that, if we want to put a silver lining around it, is actually if we could do something about the stress levels, well, that might mean that less people are going to be leaving our businesses. We're going to be able to retain talent. So there is a silver lining to that. But what all of these three stats really mean, what they come into, is this fourth stat here, which is it results in 16 million working days lost per year, costing UK businesses £22.9 billion. That's a huge amount of money that it's costing businesses. It's a huge amount of time that it's costing businesses as well. Lost productivity, lack of engagement, all of these key things. And a lot of this is preventable. If we have the right supports in place, a lot of this is preventable. But you can imagine if you think about how stress impacts people, if you think about how stress has impacted you, if you've experienced it, you're probably familiar with a lot of these signs or symptoms, the feeling tired and drained, the poor performance, just not being at your best when you feel stressed, not sleeping very well, the lack of satisfaction and sense of accomplishment that you might get, increased self-doubt or lack of confidence that people start to have, isolating and withdrawing from other people, their colleagues and friends, family members, negative perspective, negative language that comes up from people, and then taking those frustrations out on other people. You can see quite clearly if we look at some of these common signs of stress that actually, if this is going on within our workplaces, and if this is affecting 79% of our workforce, well, you can see how that impacts on the business. You can see that that impacts on productivity, engagement, creativity within our business. People are just not able to perform at their best levels. We're not able to create an environment where people can perform at their best. And this is potentially happening for 4 out of every 5 employees within our company. This is quite a significant issue, isn't it? And I think stress is something that we all know is a problem. We all know is something that's quite a commonplace issue. But I don't think we always recognize the impact that that can have. A lot of the time, it's just, well, stress is just part of life, isn't it? Stress is just part of the job, maybe. And we don't recognize the impact that that is having on our businesses. And I think the interesting way to look at it is think of it in terms of physical health. Let's say you had something in your business that was affecting the well-being, the physical well-being of 79% of your staff. Best example I can give you, imagine you've got lovely offices and you've got this revolving door at the front, but it's a little bit faulty. It's a little bit, it malfunctions. And what it means is that for 4 out of every 5 people who use it, it just gives them a really good whack as they're leaving, or it traps their finger in the side, or it does something to affect their physical well-being. It's not disastrous, it ends up with some bumps and bruises and maybe some, pinched skin. Nobody's lost a finger and nobody's died yet, but 4 out of every 5 people who use the doors end up physically harmed in some way. How long would it be before you did something about it? How quickly would you do something about those doors? I imagine it wouldn't be very long at all, would it? You'd get complaints quite quickly and you'd take action for it. But then we think about 79% of people experiencing stress. I'm going to take that off the screen because can be a bit disorientating if you stare at that for too long, can't it? But when we think about stress and mental health, we know that 79% of people are affected. But we're not always doing something about it. We're not recognizing it as the same risk factor as we would something that was causing a physical injury. So what kind of things can we do? What kind of things can we as a business have in place when it comes to dealing with stress and dealing with poor mental health? There are numerous different options out there, starting with things like having a strong mental health policy, right up to having professional services like occupational health within your team. But there's 2 very common ones that a lot of organizations will have that I want to talk about today. The first of those is mental health training, and the second is having an employee assistance program or an EAP. I'm going to talk about the benefits of both for a moment and why they're important to have and to consider having within your business. So with mental health training, what you get is on-the-ground support for your employees. If you're a small business who has 10 employees, well, you probably know all of them and you probably see them all on a regular basis. So it's quite easy maybe for you as a HR person or as a team leader, manager, CEO, whatever you might be, to be able to check in on your team because they're small. But if you've got 100 employees, 1,000 employees, how possible is it for one person to keep on top of their well-being? What you really need is people on the ground floor and at different levels throughout your business who can be that first point of contact, who can be checking in with colleagues, providing that first level support. That's what mental health first aid training does. Having mental health first aiders means you've got support throughout your organization so it isn't falling on one person to try and look after everyone. So it's incredibly valuable in that regard. It also helps to create a positive culture around mental health and help to challenge stigma. So culture comes from the top down within an organization, but you need people being able to spread that throughout the company to not only encourage people to talk about mental health, but to give and create those safe spaces where people can freely talk about it and to challenge some of those negative stigmas and stereotypes that exist around mental health. And the third point is it equips employees with knowledge and skills to be able to support themselves and to help others. Now, whether that again is mental health first aid training, whether that is just general mental health awareness training across the business, which is quite a valuable thing to do, or whether that's specific training for your managers because they are often the frontline people. They're the ones who are dealing with their colleagues, seeing these poor mental health instances occurring, equipping them with knowledge and skills about how to support their team. That has a huge knock-on effect across the whole business. So if they've got the knowledge and skills, they can hopefully help to prevent something getting much worse further down the line and can intervene early, which is so important when it comes to mental health. So that's the mental health training side. The employee assistance side, or the EAP side of things, this is all about providing access to professional counselling and therapy services when it's needed. So mental health training, we always talk about that being more of a proactive approach. It's about putting things in place so that hopefully somebody doesn't get to crisis point. But if they do, they're going to possibly need professional services. EAPs provide that counselling and therapy support. It's more immediate than public services. So if you go to your doctor, go to your GP, and you're looking at counselling or therapy support, that could be several weeks wait, anything up to 6 months wait, depending on where you're located and how stretched those services are. So EAPs can give you that immediate access to counselling and therapy much quicker than you could get it elsewhere. And it can also help support in some of those more serious cases. So if somebody's just experiencing moderate stress, going and talking to a mental health first aider or talking to a line manager who's been trained to have those conversations, that might be enough for them. They get a little bit of help and support, and that's all they needed. But if it's high levels of stress, if we're verging on the edge of burnout here, you probably need that professional support. And that's where counselling and therapy through an EAP can be incredibly valuable. Now, you might be listening to this thinking, well, that's all great because, I've got mental health first aiders in my business and we've got an EAP, so I'm all good, right? I've got everything that I need. It's not quite the case because, yes, these things are incredibly valuable, but only if they're really working and only if they're working effectively. And the reality is actually, in a lot of cases, they're not. There are some pitfalls to mental health training and to having an employee assistance program. And the problem is we don't always know what those are. So I am going to talk about kind of the issues that you should be aware of when it comes to mental health training and employee assistance programs. And I think be curious about that. Reflect on who your providers are and what kind of services you're getting and whether some of these barriers exist within your provision. And look at them. We can talk about then what you might need to do about it. So the problems with mental health training, firstly, most of the training is off the shelf. It is a set course. It's a standard course that is delivered to any business or organization that's wanting training. Now, that's okay. That means there is a base level of training and you might be getting something that there is useful parts in there, but your business is probably quite unique. You might have very specific challenges that your business is facing that isn't going to be covered in the training. So, for example, let's say you're working in a profession or an industry where you have very tight deadlines. The staff have crunch periods where they're having to work really intensely to meet a deadline. Let's say you're working in an industry where there's much more heightened security around that. Maybe you're working on contracts where there's a huge amount of scrutiny on them. where there's a lot of public pressure on them, maybe. Or, for example, we do a lot of work with a prison in the north of England, and the company that runs that prison, their staff experience trauma on a regular basis. The problem with an off-the-shelf training course is you're not addressing those issues. You're just getting blanket coverage, a very generalized approach to mental health. And like I say, you'll still get something valuable from that, but it's not really going to necessarily meet the needs of your business. So you don't get something that's bespoke and unique to you. The second point is the lack of ongoing support for mental health first aiders. Most training providers will go, you've done the 2-day training course, here's your lovely shiny certificate, off you go, best of luck. And then you're kind of left to deal with whatever comes up. Now imagine for a moment that you've done your 2-day mental health first aid training and you're really excited to go back into your workplace and start supporting your colleagues. And then you go back and a week later someone comes up to you and they say the words that no mental health first aider wants to hear, which is, I'm not sure that I want to be alive. I think the world would be better off if actually I wasn't here. And all of a sudden, those 2 days of training seem very slim. And you're sat there going, I don't know what to do with this. How do I respond? You'll have had some training about how to manage and talk to someone who's suicidal, but when you're in that moment, the weight of it, the weight of that conversation can be huge. And then how do you deal with the aftermath of that? You might actually do a really good job and that person feels supported and they get signposted on to additional support. And then you're left holding the emotion of, oh my gosh, that was really heavy. And now I'm still really worried about, is that person going to be okay? What's going to happen when they go home? And you're then carrying the weight of that. And there isn't that support in place. And as a business, you might not know how to support your mental health first aiders either. So that lack of support means that people who have volunteered to do this role can burn out very quickly and very easily, and then they can't support other people. The third point is there's no monitoring a lot of the time around mental health first aiders, around their workload, or the emotional impact. So if you've not got any tools in place to track your mental health first aiders and the conversations they're having, how do you know how many conversations are happening a week? If you've got a mental health first aider who has a conversation once, twice, once a week, once every fortnight, that's probably manageable. If they're having 10 conversations a week, well, firstly, that's going to be impacting on their job role because they're spending a lot of time having these conversations, but also the emotional impact on them if you're having 10 conversations a week is going to be heavy. So there's no tools to track that. So it's hard to look after your mental health first aiders. But also, if you're not tracking it, how do you know what kind of patterns and themes are coming up? If you've got a lot of people coming and talking to mental health first aiders and 80% of them are talking about financial stress, well, that's really helpful to know because then you might be able to put other supports in place, look at maybe other training around that. You're able to respond to the patterns and themes that are coming up if you know about them. But a lot of time, because there's no monitoring, we don't know this information. We don't have this data to work from. And lastly, there's no professional support should they be impacted by the work themselves. So you might have an EAP as well, but if you went to your EAP and said, I'm a mental health first aider and I've been having some really difficult conversations lately and it's been impacting on me, there's a likelihood actually your EAP is going to turn around and go, yeah, but that's kind of mental health training. That's not really what we do. We'll see on the next slide when we talk about exclusion criteria and the motivation they have for not providing support. The likelihood is actually your EAP might not be able to help. And then your mental health first aid is again left without any kind of support. So those are some of the barriers when it comes to training. When it comes to employee assistance programs and some of the challenges there, one of the big ones is low uptake. Statistically, the uptake on an EAP service is around 5 to 9%, depending on your business and sector. That means that around 90% at least of your workforce aren't going to be using the service. So as a business, you've paid for something that only a small percentage of people are going to use. Now, that's not necessarily a terrible thing because the whole idea is it's a safety net for everyone. Everyone has access to support, whether they need it or not, because if they do need it, at least it's there. But it means you're paying for a lot of non-usage, which from a business perspective doesn't make a lot of sense. The other thing is that there is exclusion criteria there. So it's not only the low uptake, those people who are coming forward, not everyone who calls an EAP gets to have support. Almost all EAPs will have exclusion criteria. And what I mean by that is it's things that they won't be able to support you with. Now, sometimes that's things like pre-existing conditions. But interestingly, they won't define what a pre-existing condition is. They'll just say, if it's a pre-existing condition, we can't support it. Now, that might mean that if you've got workplace stress now, but you had workplace stress 3 years ago, they might go, that's a pre-existing condition and we can't help with that. It doesn't matter about the length of time between. If you had depression as a teenager and you're experiencing it now as an adult, well, that's a pre-existing condition we can't help. The other exclusion criteria that's often a common one is something that they say is too serious for them. Or I'm sorry, that's trauma related. We can't help with that. That's too serious. You need to go through your GP or the crisis team. Now, what that means is that imagine for a second you are someone who has struggled with your mental health and you've overcome the stigmas and the judgment or the fear of judgment that's there around opening up about it. And you manage to take that really brave step to reach out for help and support. And then you're told, yeah, sorry, no, we can't help you. Imagine how that feels. That exclusion criteria saying, no, we can't. Those are the official exclusion criteria as well. What you'll often find is there are unwritten exclusion criteria. So if you do an internet search, I'm not going to mention the name, but if you were to do an internet search for BBC News EAP whistleblowing 2024, what you'll find is a couple of news reports about one of the UK's biggest EAPs and a whistleblower that came forward to say that when the calls are received into the EAP, they have a target of 19% of calls that they are allowed to put through for counselling and therapy. They are encouraged to find reasons not to provide support to the other 81%. Now, again, imagine you're that person who's reaching out for support and you're told no because the EAP is trying to meet a target. And imagine you're the business now and you've paid for a service for your staff that 81% of them aren't going to be able to receive because that's how the EAP makes money. An EAP is a bit like insurance. They sell you a product and then the way they make money is if you don't use it. They hope that you never use it because then they make that money. They don't have to spend money providing that service. That's how a traditional EAP model works. That's not very good for the business and it's certainly not good for the individual. So that exclusion criteria can be incredibly damaging. There's limited on our opportunity for additional sessions. Everyone might get 5 to 6 sessions of support, but you can't go beyond that. And actually what you can't do is say, well, these people over here haven't used it. Can we take their sessions and give them to someone who might need it? It doesn't work like that. Everyone gets the same, regardless of their need. And there's no opportunity or very limited opportunity to extend that. And there's no opportunity to self-fund that ongoing support either. So if that person has their 5 or 6 sessions and they go, this is great, I've got a great relationship with my therapist, it's working really well, I want to carry on with them, they can't. There's not the ability for them to self-fund their ongoing support, even if they wanted to. So again, some of those barriers mean that just having an EAP isn't necessarily meaning that you've got the right support in place. And what it essentially means is you're ticking some very basic boxes. Like I've got mental health first aiders and I've got an EAP, but they're not really delivering for you. And when I say ticking a box, I don't think that any of us necessarily go into this thinking, yeah, I just want to tick a box to say we've done it. We're going into it with the good intention of, I want to provide the support for my employees. We don't know what we don't know, but none of these kind of barriers around training and EAPs are ever told to anyone. So if you don't know that that's an issue, well, you're just going to think that you've got something that's working when actually you might have something that isn't. So what can be done about this? I think it's one of those things where it's really interesting to think, well, if we know that these are some of the issues of traditional models, if only there was some way that we could address them. If only there was some organization that had looked at this and kind of gone, yeah, you know what, we can make this better. We can provide a better service for people. Good news is there is. Now, some of you are probably at this point expecting me to go into a 5-minute spiel about Red Umbrella and what we do, and actually why what we do is, the way we view it, is simply the best service that can be provided, and to kind of go into all of that. Because some of you are expecting that, I would hate to disappoint you by not doing it. And actually, in fact, at Red Umbrella, we're not about meeting expectations. We're all about exceeding expectations. So I am going to talk about it for 6 minutes. But I do want to talk about it, and there is a very good reason why I want to talk about what we do and why we're different. It's not just so that I can brag about how good of a service we have. It's a little bit so I can brag about how good of a service we have. But there is another valid point that I am going to get to around this. So We are the only UK-owned mental health provider that offers this full wraparound service. I talked about proactive and reactive. Proactive is the training side that hopefully improves the culture in an organization, provides immediate support so that someone doesn't get to crisis. But if they do get to crisis, that reactive support, the counseling and therapy support, is there to pick up that slack and pick up that support. And we're the only one who provides both. We provide the training and the therapy and everything else around it. You need help around mental health policies, we can provide that for you. You need ongoing support in a particular area, we can provide that for you too. We're very reactionary in terms of we can provide whatever support you might need, and we provide that full wraparound service. And our mental health training and our therapy services are very different. So our mental health training is very bespoke. We tailor it to your business. We don't do the off-the-shelf training. It's about, okay, what are the particular challenges your business is facing? Let's build that into the training so that the learners on that course not only are learning some incredibly valuable skills and knowledge, but it's relevant to them. They can go, yeah, I've been in that situation before. And it's really good now to think, okay, this is what I can do if I'm in that situation again. Or actually, we've got this particular challenge, and it's great then we're talking about how that affects mental health and what we can then do about it. They take away some very practical steps so that they can make an instant impact within your business. And they're learning things that are relevant to them. We also provide aftercare support for all of the mental health training that we do as well. Now, what that means is if you're in a situation where you're thinking, I just don't know what to do here, I've got this situation, no idea how to respond, you can pick up the phone to us, you can drop us an email, and we can provide advice and guidance and support to help you get through that moment and talk about some of the things that you can do to help in that situation. If you've had a conversation and you're thinking, as a mental health first aider, and you're thinking, I think I did everything okay, I think I've done everything right, I just want to run it by someone and just get that bit of reassurance, you can give us a call about that as well. And again, we'll just talk through what happens, talk through the things you've done. If there's any suggestions of other things you might consider, we can provide that. But it might just be giving you that reassurance of, no, you did a great job there. There's nothing else that you need to worry about. You've done great. And the other thing the aftercare support provides that is unique to Red Umbrella is that if, as a mental health first aider, you find that your well-being is being affected, maybe you've had some really difficult conversations and it's just stuck with you and it's affecting your emotions, it's affecting your mood and how you're feeling in that, we will provide you with counseling and therapy support to help you through that moment. So you have access to well-being support for yourself as well. That aftercare support is vital because it's that safety net for all of you who do the training, that hopefully you can go forward and you can be confident to use your newfound skills to support others. But if you need that little bit of help, you know that you've always got Red Umbrella in your corner, that you can contact us. We also can provide tools to track your mental health first aiders' workload in a confidential way, so we can abide by the rules of confidentiality, but still provide you with data, themes, patterns that are evolving that can help you as a business to react to what might be going on in terms of your employees' mental health. And we can provide opportunities for ongoing learning as well. So we can do regular CPD sessions so that your mental health first aiders are adding to their skills on a regular basis. That can just help them to feel more confident in their role and feel that their role is really valued as well. So there's a lot around the training side of things that we do that's a little bit different. Around the therapy side of things, the big thing is the Care Coins model that we use. So Care Coins is a product of Red Umbrella, and what it is a kind of almost like a digital token system, if you like. Rather than paying a set amount and, well, that covers everyone, but there's going to be a lot of non-usage there, you purchase a pot of Care Coins and you call those off against whatever services you need. That can be counseling and therapy, but you can also use them for training. But what that means is that you can allocate those funds and that support to the people who need it, and you're only ever paying for what you need. You're never paying for non-usage. So you might find you've got someone who they don't need 5 sessions. Actually, they could do with 10 or 15. But you can provide that because you're not paying for these people over here who are never going to use it. So because you're not paying for non-usage, you can allocate those funds to where they need to go. What that means is people will get the best kind of support they need, maybe for as long as they might need it as well. And because you're not paying for non-usage, the business is getting a much more efficient use of its funding towards this. It means that people have better outcomes And part of that is also that we handpick the therapists that we use. So we have a core team of around 100 therapists that we use, and we have access to the wider membership of 70,000 BACP members, which is the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy. They're all hand vetted. They've all signed up to an ethical framework. They all have demonstrated competency, and they've all got good experience at what they do. And because they've been handpicked, we know that they match with our values and our ethos as well. That means that you're getting the best possible support. And what that means is that you're less likely to need longer term support. We do a very intensive initial consultation to start off with. So we really try and understand someone's needs and preferences. And we match them up, we hand match them to the right kind of therapist. So if you've got an employee who's coming to us and they're struggling with their mental health because they're going through the menopause, we will go and find a therapist that specializes in working with menopause. Rather than just giving you any old therapist that we find, by matching up to someone who has specific experience and training in that area, they're going to need less support to feel better. They're going to have a much better outcome as a result of that. So it's business efficiencies, but also the main thing is that it's what's in the best interest of the employee. That's the foundation of all of our model, is what is in the best interest of this person. So by handpicking our therapists, by only being able to provide the support that's needed, that provides those business efficiencies, but also puts that person at the heart of what we do. We don't have exclusion criteria. We're never going to turn around to someone and say, no, we can't help you. The only situation where we might is if someone is actively suicidal and at risk of harm to themselves immediately, because what you need in that moment is the crisis team. But what we'll say is, okay, you need the crisis team right now. We'll provide you access to them. And then when you've finished with the crisis team, you can come back to us and we will provide that ongoing support. So even then, it's not a no, it's a let's get you in front of the right people for now. This is the support you need right now. Let's do that. Come back to us when you're ready. We don't say no for things like trauma, even things like schizophrenia, psychosis. We will have therapists who are experts in dealing with this and can support someone, so that nobody who comes and uses our services ever has to hear the word no. That's really important to us. And there's also that opportunity for employees to fund ongoing support. So the idea of buying a pot of care coins and allocating them out also means that individuals can purchase care coins as well. And that opens the door to an awful lot of different options, because there is a valid question now of, as a business, how much support should you provide? If somebody needs 50 sessions of therapy, is it the onus of the business to provide that? Because you will see a benefit from them having that support. Or is there a cutoff point where actually, well, we're kind of responsible for maybe that first instance of support, but then maybe that has to be picked up by the employee going forward. And again, with an EAP, you don't have the option of that. It's just a limited number of sessions. But here you could say, well, okay, we'll provide you with the first 5 sessions, and then for the next 5, we'll go halves with you. We'll pay half the funding towards it. You can pay half the funding as an employee. And then any sessions after that, you can fully fund it as an employee. And that gives you that flexibility to provide whatever support. You might say, okay, every employee gets to have 5 sessions a year, and you can allocate it however you want to. But that ability for employees to provide their own support, to continue that support with the same therapist, with no drop in service, that gives them that option to carry on if they're finding it really valuable. So that in itself is a huge win for both the business and for the employee. So you can see how we're sort of slightly different in how we approach this, how we try and address those challenges. Why am I talking about this? Part of it, yes, it is a little bit of a sales pitch. My hope is that you're looking and going, actually, this sounds really good. Like, we really like the kind of the ethos behind this and the idea of putting the employee at the heart of what we do and making sure that they're getting the right support. My hope is that that does appeal, but there's also another reason why I'm talking about this, and that's to bring it back to the fact of we're talking about the power of people in business and that the importance of looking after our employees. And I'm going to tell you a little story, short little story that happened about 8 weeks ago. 8 weeks ago, I get an email from one of my therapists, and she says, I've got my client on the phone and they're at Beachy Head. Those of you not familiar with Beachy Head, the most common, well, I say when we use the word popular, which feels like wrong in this context, but it's one of the most common places that people go to end their life by suicide. Big cliff face down on the south coast of England, lots of people a year end their life by suicide there. So she's got a client who's actively suicidal, who's at the cliffs. She's on the phone to him. She's on the phone at the same time. She's emailing me so that I can help provide support. When we talk about hand-picked expert therapists, she is the best example I could give you for this. She did an incredible job. She's on the phone to him. She's just talking to him. She's just getting him to talk. All she's trying to do at this point is keep him alive, minute by minute by minute. That's all she's trying to do. But at the same time, she's simultaneously passing details to me, so I'm on the phone to the police, and we're trying to locate this person. And she's just talking to him, but she manages to get him to turn his video on so that she can see him. He's talking about butterflies that he can see, and she's like, "Oh, turn your video on. Show me the butterfly." She doesn't care about the butterfly. What she wants to do is have it so that he can see her, so that he can see there's someone there for him, but also she can try and see where he is. So then she's emailing me saying he's about 30 feet away from the cliff edge. He's in some bushes. I can hear people's voices, so I think there's a path nearby. And I'm on the phone to the police relaying all of this information. It took about an hour to do. And after an hour or so, the police found him and got him to safety. And he is still safe, touch wood, thankfully. Now, I tell that story because imagine for a second that is one of your colleagues. One of your colleagues is feeling that low and is struggling with their mental health that much that they are actively contemplating ending their life. And they ring up your EAP. Is your EAP going to respond in the same way? Now, my hope is that you can stand there and go, yes, I feel absolutely confident that they would. I feel confident that they would do exactly the same to keep my employee safe. If you're not sure, I would say that gives you something to reflect on, because that is the level of support that should be provided. Because ultimately, it comes down to how do we look after our people in the best possible way. The hope is that actually we put measures in place so nobody ever gets to that point. But the reality is some people will. And when they do, are our support services going to be there in the right way? Are they going to be able to help that person in their moment of need? I'm very proud of how we respond to those kind of situations. I'm incredibly proud of our therapist who did the most amazing job. But I'm also very proud that we've got those systems in place, which mean that we will stop everything to help provide that immediate support. Because ultimately it's about what is best for that person in that moment. And this is where I want you to reflect on your services that you have. Would they go the extra mile for you? And ultimately, when it comes to if it's a provider who's providing IT solutions, or it's providing your office furniture, or it's providing food for your canteen, and I'm being a bit blasé here, but let's be honest, if they don't quite excel in that, they just do a good enough job, it's probably going to be fine. You're probably not going to have massive issues from it. But when it comes to the health and well-being of our colleagues, we shouldn't accept anything less than the best, because that's going to help them in their moment of need. It's going to help them to thrive within our organizations. And when they thrive, the business thrives as well. So what kind of actions should you take? I'm using the word should here very deliberately. I'm going to come back to why in a moment, because I don't like using the word should. It feels like I'm sitting here telling you what you should do, and what authority do I have to tell you what you should do in your business? But I'll explain why I'm using the word should in a moment. I'm just going to give you some little tips to take away of actions that you can take. I think the first one there is put some support in place if you've got nothing. If you haven't got mental health training and you haven't got any AP, it's vitally important that you put something in place. I would say mental health first aiders are the quickest and easiest way to start seeing an impact. And even if you're just a small business, you might just consider putting 1 or 2 people on the course. You don't need to train everyone necessarily. If you've only got 20 employees, you don't need to train them all as mental health first aiders, but having a couple might be beneficial. And you'll start to see the immediate benefits of having people there who can promote a positive culture, who can have those initial conversations and are trained to be able to have those conversations and signpost on. If you're able to invest in a good EAP, please do. Because again, there will be some people who will get to that reactive stage where we need immediate support. Having a good EAP in place is incredibly valuable as well. But start with training. If you haven't got anything in place and you can only do one thing, training's probably the thing to do. If you have got an EAP, check out what their exclusion criteria is. Again, this will probably be in their contract, so you will probably have seen it at some point, but it's probably going to be hidden in all the details of the contract, so you may not have noticed it the first time round. but then check if that meets with your business needs. If I mentioned again that prison that we work with up in the north of England, if their EAP has an exclusion criteria that says we can't help if it's trauma related, well, that's not going to be any good at all. If your business is actually dealing with traumatic and difficult situations, it's no good having that as an exclusion criteria. So see what it is, see if it fits with your business. Also ask for the data on usage. They might give you this anyway, but you might have to ask for it. So ask for usage data for the last 12 months so you can see what the uptake is for yourself, but also ask for instances where support's been denied to them. That's really important because an EAP won't tell you that voluntarily, but ask them for how many times have people rung up from our company and been denied support, and see what the data is on that. Because again, that might inform your decision about whether you think this is working for you or not. Next tip I've got is check out the refresher date for your mental health first aiders training. The training lasts for a period of 3 years, and then you need to do a refresher or requalification course. So don't let it go over the 3-year window. It's actually really important because so much changes around mental health. So 3 years is quite a long time. 3 years is possibly quite a long time in your business as well. So things might have changed there too. So don't let it go over the 3-year date. Get that refresher training booked in. And it helps those mental health first aiders to have the confidence to keep doing their role. The last tip I want to give you is look at what risk factors you have within your business and what additional training or support you might need around this. So again, every business will be unique. Every business will be different. You might have unique challenges that no one else faces within your sector. Having training around tackling those issues can be incredibly beneficial in helping you to mitigate some of that risk. And actually, if you've got something that's affecting the whole of your business, that's quite a unique challenge, webinars are a really good cost-effective way to get a base level of knowledge and education across your workforce. It's something that doesn't take very long to do. They're very cost-effective. And what it means is that everyone gets this underlying understanding and knowledge. And you can tailor a webinar to a very specific subject. So if you've got a workforce, for example, where a large majority of them have come from military backgrounds and they're veterans, having some training around trauma-informed workplaces might be really valuable, or having some training around how military veterans might experience things like PTSD in current roles. You could get very specific training that's done over a short period of time. You can have that then recorded so that you've got that available for anyone else who might need it further down the line. It's a really good way of just covering off some of those risk factors in a very cost-effective way. So I used the word should around that. Why should we? Why am I sitting here saying you should do these things? Well, there's 3 main reasons for using the word should. The first is that it's a moral responsibility. As human beings, we should want our colleagues to be happy and healthy. That's what we should want, including those people that maybe you don't necessarily like either. We should still want them to be happy and healthy at work. So it's a moral responsibility we have there to look after people. It is also a legal responsibility. So if you're going, I don't really care about the moral stuff, like, just don't care about it. Okay, well, you do have a legal responsibility here too, under the Health and Safety at Work Act, just to name one piece of legislation. You've got the Equality Act as well as part of that. We have that legal responsibility to do something. We can't do nothing. If you're looking at those first 2 and thinking, well, I don't really care about my employees' well-being, to be honest, and not really bothered about the legislation stuff either. Okay, here's a third reason for you, the return on investment. There's been research done into the return on investment around mental health programs, and it shows there is a significant return there. For mental health training, the return on investment is £4.70 for every £1 spent, according to Deloitte. So the return there is significant. Again, that's employee engagement, less absenteeism, less presenteeism, people leaving and then having to be replaced, making mistakes, things like that. The return on investment is significant. The return on investment for EAPs is apparently £8 for every £1 spent. I'm going to put the caveat there that research was done by the Employee Assistance Programme Association. They do have a vested interest in that looking good. So, but even if we looked at that and said, okay, well, maybe that's been exaggerated a little bit. If we halved that and said it's £4 for every £1 spent, that still shows there's a significant return on investment there. So hopefully we're doing this and we're all on board because it's the right thing to do and it's the moral thing to do. If we're not on board with the moral thing, okay, there's a legal responsibility there. And if we're not on board with that, okay, let's look at the business case for it. The return on investment is significant. So those are the reasons why we should be doing this. So if you've been listening to this and thinking, okay, well, I haven't got something in place and I'm interested, or we have got something in place, but I'm not sure if it is a good fit, and you want to know a bit more, what I would say is just get in touch with us. Even if that's just to have a chat about what you've currently got in place and whether it's working or not. If that's just that you want some advice and guidance on next steps, but you're not necessarily going to come with us, that's fine too. We're happy to help support you on that journey with advice and guidance. But if you are thinking, well, I'm really interested in what you do, and I'd like to see how you can maybe help our organization, we'd really want you to get in touch with us. We'd be really delighted to have that call to look at how we can help support you. And as part of our Power of People in Business event, we're putting a special offer in place. So that is 20% off any mental health first aid training course, up to 16 people. Or if you want to put just an individual on a course, it's 20% off an individual place on one of our open courses. Those open courses run pretty much every month from February next year onwards. Or if you're looking at the counselling and therapy side and you're thinking, well, yeah, I'm quite interested in putting something in place. I like the idea of maybe it being pay as you go so that I'm not having to make a massive financial input. I can sort of just pay for it as and when I need to. We've got 20% off any care coins purchases that you can use against counselling and therapy. The other thing is actually if you've got an EAP and maybe you might be tied into that contract with them for another year, another couple of years maybe, but you know that there are gaps there where people aren't able to get support, what you can also use is a small pot of care coins just to cut for those gaps. So it might be a simple case of you're just purchasing it just to help support those people who are excluded from your EAP so that everyone has access to support. So it doesn't have to be that you're using it as your full EAP service. You might just use us to plug some of those gaps. But again, you can get 20% off that. This kind of offer is running until the end of the year. You don't have to book on a training course by the end of the year, but you do have to kind of register your interest with us. So what I would say is between now and sort of the end of the year, just get in touch. And if you're interested, let's start that conversation. Let's start that dialogue going and see how we can help support you with your mental health journey. Thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been useful. I hope it's sort of given you some things to think about and be curious about, some useful things to take away and think about how you look at your mental health provision and mental health support within your business. If you do want to get in touch, you can contact us directly at team@red-umbrella.co.uk, or you can contact me directly. That's Nathan Shearman at red-umbrella.co.uk. Thank you very much for listening. Have a lovely rest of your day. Bye for now.